The first warning sign came when my faucet coughed out a puff of air instead of water. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, staring at the rust-colored dribble sputtering out of the tap. My name's Barrett Langley. I'm a retired commercial plumber, and after 2 decades of busting my back in the city, I bought myself a quiet cabin up in the pines. Just a modest place on the edge of a private lake, with a wraparound porch and enough space to breathe. 3 months ago, the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association welcomed me with a fake smile and a 23-page booklet of rules. I should have sniffed them out, then especially the president, Kendra Whitmore. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, and the voice of someone who thinks customer service is a threat to personal freedom. Kendra ran the HOA like it was her personal kingdom. She once fined my neighbor for hanging a towel over their deck railing. A towel. So I kept to myself, paid my dues, and tried not to poke the hornet's nest, that is, until this morning. I checked the main shutoff. Nothing. No leaks, no frozen lines, no busted pipes. I knew what I was looking for. I followed the pipe out to the curb and opened the meter box, locked. Now that was odd. I never locked my own meter. Then I saw the tiny red tag hanging from the shutoff valve. Property in violation water suspended by order of Cedar Ridge HOA. I stormed down to the HOA office, a converted community center with too much air freshener and not enough soul. Kendra was there, perched behind a mahogany desk like a queen on her throne. "You can't just shut off someone's water," I said, holding up the tag. She didn't even look at it. "Mr. Langley, your cabin is in violation of Section 9, subsection B. You installed an unauthorized shed." "That's not a shed, that's a firewood lean-to," she smiled like she rehearsed it in a mirror. "Regardless, we sent 3 notices. You failed to respond." "I didn't get any notices. Not our fault if you don't check your mailbox." "Regulations allow us to suspend utilities for non-compliance." I stared at her. "So your solution to a building code violation is to cut off my water? You realize that's illegal, right?" She crossed her arms. "We're well within our rights, Mr. Langley. If you don't like it, take it up with the board." The board was Kendra and 2 of her golf buddies. Useless. I walked out of that office with a cold fury in my chest. You don't mess with a man's running water, especially not a man who used to install water systems for a living. That night, I did a little digging, and I found something interesting. The entire neighborhood's water system, including the main distribution line that fed the homes, ran through a neglected easement that crossed a half-acre parcel just outside the development. And that parcel, it had just gone up for auction. The next morning, I was the highest and only bidder. For $12,000, I bought the land that housed the main water feed for the entire Cedar Ridge neighborhood, and I still had the keys to every shut-off valve design in the state. I waited until Friday evening, right after Kendra's little wine and cheese board meeting wrapped up. Then I took a walk down to the utility shed that sat on my new property. Let's just say, I turned the tables, every house, every faucet, every shower bone dry. By Saturday morning, the whole community was in chaos. I sat on my porch with a mug of black coffee, watching as a parade of SUVs and golf carts crisscrossed the gravel roads, their drivers wild-eyed and shouting into cell phones that couldn't fix a dry toilet or a useless shower. Sprinklers sat still on manicured lawns. The lake shimmered in the distance, untouched and ironically full. At just past 8, a white Lexus tore up my driveway like it owned the gravel it scattered. Kendra stepped out, heels sinking into dirt, hair already frizzing in the humidity. She didn't bother with hellos. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she snapped, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge of office. I stood up slowly, set my mug down on the porch rail. "Exercising my property rights, that land with the pump station on it, I bought it. Yesterday. And I've got the deed and county records to prove it. You cut off water to over 80 homes. Technically," I said, "I just closed access to equipment on private land, equipment that, as of now, is trespassing. You can't do that." "Actually, I can. There's no recorded easement." which means your water infrastructure's sitting illegally on land that doesn't belong to you. She stared at me, blinking. That clipboard started to tremble in her hands. I'll call the county. They'll have you arrested for tampering. I didn't tamper with anything, I replied calmly. I accessed a structure on my land and exercised my right to control what happens on it. But if you'd like to get the county involved, be my guest. In fact, I've already talked to them. She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. Turns out, I continued, the county's been trying to get the HOA to bring those lines up to code for years. They've issued citations ignored. Your system's outdated, uninsulated, and technically unsafe. So when I told them where the main valve is, they weren't exactly in a hurry to argue with me. Kendra's face flushed so red it was almost impressive. This is extortion. This is leverage. You shut off my water without notice, without justification, and you hid behind language that doesn't even grant you that authority. Now, I'm giving you a chance to fix it. She stepped forward, jabbing her clipboard toward my chest. You'll turn the water back on right now, or I'll sue you so hard your retirement will evaporate. I leaned against the porch post. You're welcome to try, but you might want to have a look at your HOA's liability insurance. Because if I were you, I'd be worried about the residents suing you. She hesitated. 80 homes without water, that's food spoilage, missed medication, no firefighting capacity, septic backups. You really think no one's gonna start asking who's responsible? Kendra didn't answer. She turned, stomped back to her car, and peeled out of my driveway with enough fury to send dust clouds rolling through the pines. By noon, I'd received calls from 5 different board members. I told each of them the same thing. I wasn't unreasonable. I just wanted my water back and the HOA to rescind the violation that never existed. Only one of them asked the right question. How can we make this right? That came from a man named Glenn, a retired engineer who'd always kept his head down at meetings. He was the treasurer, and unlike the others, he had a sense for risk. First step, I told him, is getting a real plumber out here, someone licensed, not your cousin's handyman. You need a full inspection of that system, and you need it documented. You also need to start the process of applying for a legal easement with the county. He sighed through the phone. That's going to take weeks. Yup, maybe longer. People are going to lose their minds. Maybe they should have elected better leadership. He didn't argue. That evening, I got a visit from a sheriff's deputy. Not in uniform, just jeans and a tucked-in polo with a badge clipped to his belt. He introduced himself as Deputy Harlan from the county's Infrastructure Enforcement Division. I heard you've been busy, he said, eyeing the pump station down the hill. Not half as busy as I'm about to be. Well, I've got paperwork confirming the property transfer. You're in the clear, but there's more. He pulled a folded sheet from his back pocket. This is a notice of investigation. We've opened a formal case against the Cedar Ridge HOA for code violations and unauthorized utility governance. They actually went through with it, he nodded. We've been waiting for a reason to dig deeper. You gave us one. I took the paper, read it slowly. It outlined a series of charges: failure to maintain infrastructure, operating without inspection records, and issuing punitive actions without legal authority. And if they try to retaliate, I asked, let us know. We've got eyes on them now. I thanked him, and he left with a quiet nod. After that, things started to move fast. Word got around the neighborhood that the HOA had been operating outside their bounds for years. Fines that weren't enforceable. Mandates that weren't legal. People who'd been afraid to speak up before started knocking on my door. An elderly couple from down the road brought over a binder full of HOA meeting minutes they'd been collecting for years. A single mother 2 streets over had emails showing how the board ignored her maintenance requests for months while demanding dues. And then there was Carl. Carl was a former city attorney who had retired up here to fish and be left alone. He'd avoided every meeting, every committee, every newsletter, until now. He showed up wearing a fishing vest and a ball cap and handed me a manila envelope. This, he said, is a draft of a class action suit. I've been meaning to do something with it for years. Looks like the time's right. I flipped it open. It named the HOA, the board members individually, and cited state-level statutes on abuse of authority, misappropriation of funds, and failure to comply with municipal oversight. "You've been sitting on this," he shrugged, waiting for the right match to light it. Over the next week, the community transformed. People who never spoke to each other before were organizing. A temporary water service was arranged through portable tanks and emergency hookups. Volunteers distributed water for cooking and washing. The HOA's office was shuttered, its locks changed by vote of a newly formed interim committee, and she vanished, no calls, no emails. Her Lexus sat idle in her driveway for 3 days before it disappeared overnight. Word was she'd hired a lawyer, but no one could confirm it. By the end of the second week, the county issued a formal cease and desist to the original HOA board. Their authority was suspended pending the outcome of the investigation, and just like that, the fear was gone. No more threats. No more fines. Just neighbors helping neighbors. One evening, I stood down by the pump station staring at the panel. I could have flipped the switch, restored everything, but I didn't, not yet. Some lessons need to stick. I didn't hear from Kendra for 12 days. Then early one morning, I was loading lumber onto the bed of my truck when a black SUV rolled slowly past my driveway, windows tinted, plates out of state. It paused for a beat longer than normal before coasting on. Maybe nothing. Maybe not. I made a mental note, then drove into town. At the county records office, I met with a clerk named Denise, who had spent the last 3 days neck deep in Cedar Ridge's HOA filings. She handed me a folder with a look that said, "You're going to want to sit down." I opened it on the counter. Inside were 10 years of annual financial reports, hastily stapled meeting minutes, and a spreadsheet that did not add up. Literally. "You see the problem?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, pointing to a column labeled Maintenance Reserves Disbursed Funds. "This line has over 40,000 missing." "And there's no receipt trail," Denise nodded. "We've flagged it. County auditors already pulled previous years. Looks like someone's been moving HOA funds into a separate account, not officially reported." "Where did it go?" That's the fun part. "You'll love this." She pulled out a printed bank statement and tapped a withdrawal marked Whitmore Consulting Advisory Fee. I blinked. "Kendra's last name is Whitmore." "Exactly." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "We're talking potentially 6 figures over the last 5 years. All under the radar. No oversight, no board vote authorization, nothing. The name on the withdrawals. A shell company registered in Nevada, no employees, no services rendered." I stood there a moment, jaw tight. "You told the sheriff," already briefed. "They've escalated it to the state attorney's office. If this holds, we're talking wire fraud, embezzlement, and criminal misuse of HOA funds." I thanked her and made my way back to the truck, brain buzzing. This wasn't just petty power abuse anymore. This was full-blown white-collar crime hidden behind garden variety HOA nonsense. And Kendra, she wasn't just on the run from angry neighbors. She was dodging a serious prison term. That night I called Carl, the city attorney turned fishing recluse. He picked up on the second ring. "You were right," I said. "This goes deeper." "I figured," he replied. "You don't cut off 80 homes' water over a woodshed unless you've got something bigger to protect." I told him about the shell company, the withdrawals, the investigation. "You need to make sure the residents know," he said. "If the board was complicit even just by signing blank approvals, we can make the case for a total purge. Restructure the entire HOA. Replace it with something transparent. Something that doesn't involve sabotage and fake violations," I muttered. Carl chuckled. "Exactly." We agreed to reconvene at the community center, which had been padlocked since the interim committee voted to suspend board operations. Glenn, the engineer, had managed to get a temporary key from the county. The plan was to hold a town hall, give people the truth, let them decide what came next. Word spread fast. By Thursday evening, nearly every household had someone there, folding chairs filling the room and the hall outside. No official board members showed. No surprise. Glenn stood at the front with a dry erase board and a stack of printed packets. I stayed off to the side, watching faces shift as he laid it all out: every misused dollar, every phony fee, every unexplained bank transfer. He didn't sugarcoat it. "The truth is," Glenn said, "we were asleep at the wheel. We let a closed-door group of 3 run this place like a private empire. That ends now." People began asking questions. Real ones. Not about grass length or mailbox paint, about oversight, voting rights, budget transparency. They weren't angry anymore. They were awake. Then someone burst through the rear doors, a man in a blue windbreaker with a badge hanging from his belt. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "Detective Nolan, State Financial Crimes Division. Is Mr. Langley here?" I raised a hand. "Right here." He walked over, motioned me aside. "We've located Kendra Whitmore. She attempted to withdraw a large sum from a Las Vegas bank using falsified documents. She's in custody." I blinked. That fast, she knew she was cornered, tried to disappear, didn't work. He handed me a form. "You may be contacted as a witness, possibly to testify about the water shutoff incident and the circumstances that led to discovery of the fraud. I'll be there. Appreciate it." He turned to leave, then paused. "You did the right thing. Most folks would have just reconnected their own water and let the rest rot." "Yeah," I said, "but rot spreads." He nodded once, then disappeared into the night. After that, things moved fast. The county appointed a temporary audit committee. Carl drafted a new framework for community governance, completely dissolving the old HOA and replacing it with a resident-run cooperative. No more fines for paint colors. No more threats in the mailbox. Just basic maintenance, emergency planning, and collective decisions voted on by everyone. We held a formal election under county supervision. Glenn was elected chair. A retired nurse named Evelyn took over budgeting, and I declined a formal position. Told them I'd rather focus on fixing pipes and finishing the deck I'd been meaning to build. But I agreed to serve as a volunteer advisor, mostly to make sure no one tried anything like this again. One morning, about 3 weeks after Kendra's arrest, a moving truck pulled into the neighborhood. The new neighbors, a young couple with a toddler and a golden retriever, stepped out looking confused. "Are you the HOA rep?" the husband asked, holding a welcome packet. I laughed. "Used to be, now we're just neighbors." He looked relieved. "We came from a place where they fined us for wind chimes." "Not here," I said. "You want wind chimes? Go wild. Just don't block the fire road and we'll get along fine." And we did. The water came back on, this time under proper permits and with new insulation. The pump station stayed on my property, but I signed a cooperative use agreement. No money, just mutual respect. We built a tool shed behind the community center, stocked it with donated equipment. A few teens started a lawn service to help older residents. Someone started a weekend farmers market in the old HOA parking lot. The place felt different, not utopian but real. Free. Kendra's trial was slated for early fall. Last I heard, she was negotiating a plea, multiple felonies, possible restitution. She wouldn't be back. And the shed they threatened me over, still standing. I added a coat of redwood stain and carved a sign above the door. Section 9, subsection B. People got a kick out of that. As for me, I still wake up early, still drink my coffee on the porch. But now I don't just see trees and cabins. I see a community one that got pushed around long enough to finally push back, and if anyone ever tries to pull the same stunt again, well. I still own the main line. 2 months passed. The air had that early fall crispness to it, and the lake reflected the gold of changing leaves. Most mornings, I'd split kindling beside the shed or patch fence posts, but lately I'd been getting called over to other cabins, folks asking for help rerouting spigots, checking well pumps, or just wanting a second opinion on pressure regulators. I never charged. They paid me in blackberry jam, venison jerky, or homebrew, which was more than fine by me. One morning, I was elbow deep in a neighbor's crawlspace tracing a line that someone had installed backwards, go figure, when Glenn called. His voice had a tightness I hadn't heard since the town hall. They found something. I wiped my hands and climbed out. Where? Behind the old HOA records cabinet. Cleaning crew moved the filing drawers to install shelves, and there was a hidden panel, false back. I stood in the driveway, watching a crow flap across the lake. You open it? Not yet. There's a safe behind it. One of the newer ones, digital keypad, county's sending someone out. I drove there as the crew from the auditor's office arrived. One of them, a woman with a buzz cut and a canvas tool roll, got to work on the combination panel. She didn't speak except to ask for silence. It clicked open in under 2 minutes. Inside was a stack of manila folders, a flash drive, and a small wooden box. The folders were labeled with handwritten codes, but the flash drive was more telling. The tech from the county slotted it into his laptop and froze. He turned the screen so we could see a spreadsheet, dozens of names, not just Cedar Ridge residents, people from adjacent developments. Addresses, dollar amounts, and a column labeled preferred contractors. Glenn leaned in. Wait, these are payouts. The tech nodded. Kickbacks. Looks like the HOA was funneling neighborhood maintenance contracts to specific companies in exchange for a cut. Landscaping, plumbing, even security patrols. I scanned the list. Half these companies don't even exist anymore. They did, the tech replied. Long enough to cash checks. We dug into the folders next. Inside were photocopies of checks issued from HOA accounts, some to companies on the list, others to personal accounts. One folder held correspondence between Kendra and a man named Victor Rhodes. The name rang a bell. Carl joined us later that afternoon. He flipped through the documents silently, then pulled out his phone. I know this guy, he said. Victor Rhodes. Used to be a city zoning commissioner, got run out of office after a bribery scandal, disappeared for a while. Looks like he resurfaced under the table. That night, the county launched a second, wider investigation. Turns out Cedar Ridge wasn't the only neighborhood under Kendra's thumb. She and Victor had been creating preferred vendor lists for at least 6 communities, all under Shell HOA's rubber stamped by dummy boards. Residents were charged inflated dues, and profits were siphoned into joint accounts registered under fake consulting firms. The entire scheme had gone unnoticed for years because the HOAs were technically independent. No state oversight unless someone made a formal complaint, and no one ever had, until now. The DA convened a grand jury. Carl was brought in as a subject matter expert. I was asked to provide testimony regarding the water shutoff and my discovery of the easement loophole. But the real star was the flash drive. It had everything: payment schedules, email threads, vendor assignments, and even contingency plans in case someone became problematic. My name was on that list along with the note. Langley ex-union, possible leverage needed. They'd flagged me from day one. The trial was scheduled for early spring. Kendra was transferred to a federal holding facility. Victor was picked up in Arizona, trying to lease a ranch under a false name. The charges ranged from wire fraud to racketeering. At the pre-trial hearing, the judge reviewed the flash drive in chambers. When court resumed, he looked over his glasses and said, "This is not just mismanagement. This is systemic exploitation of private citizens for personal gain." Kendra's attorney tried to argue that she was just a figurehead, manipulated by Victor. But the emails told a different story, her language cold, strategic, and calculating. She had directed the water shutoff at my cabin personally, calling it a test of compliance. The judge denied bail. Back in Cedar Ridge, the new cooperative council passed a resolution to permanently dissolve all ties to external HOA management firms. Carl finalized a community charter that prevented any single resident from holding more than one leadership position at a time. Voting was now required on all financial decisions exceeding $2,000, and all records, publicly posted in a shared online drive and printed for physical access at the community center. The manila folders and flash drive were archived by the county and submitted as evidence. But we kept copies. Not out of paranoia, just so we'd never forget how close we came to being owned. I returned to my usual routine, replaced a few rotten planks on the dock, helped a neighbor build a greenhouse using salvaged panels from an old barn. People had started referring to me as the water guy, which I didn't mind. It beat the guy with the unauthorized shed. One evening, Glenn invited me to a gathering down by the lake. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs, firewood, and a few coolers. But something about the way people laughed told me this was the first time in a long while they weren't worried about getting fined for having fun. Evelyn passed me a plate of smoked trout. "You know," she said, "you didn't have to go through all that trouble. You could have just moved your shed. Would have been easier," I admitted. But I don't like being told I don't have a say in my own home," she nodded. "None of us do, we just forgot we had a choice." Someone started playing guitar, an older man I didn't know joined in on harmonica. Carl passed around a stack of old HOA newsletters, now relabeled as fictional comedy. They had us howling. Before I left, Glenn pulled me aside. "We've got a surplus in the new budget. Thought we might turn the old HOA office into a workshop, communal space. Tools, benches. Maybe host some classes." I raised an eyebrow. "You offering me a job?" "Nope, just a key. In case you feel like teaching folks how not to flood their basements." I took the key. The next morning, I walked down to the pump station. The panel was humming quietly. I opened the access hatch and checked the pressure gauge. Steady. Clean. I locked it up, not because I didn't trust the others, but because it was mine to protect. Not from the people, but for them. The lake caught the morning light just right, and I remembered a time when the only sound out here had been wind and the occasional pine cone rolling off a roof. It was peaceful then, but it was hollow. Now you could hear voices. Laughter. Hammers. Life. And that, I realized, was worth every shut-off valve I'd ever closed, even the ones I'd opened.